Well, hello, fellow Montgomery Field pilots. I'm John King.
And I'm Martha King.
Welcome to Making Friends for Montgomery Field. You know, every pilot's first concern is always safety of those in the aircraft and on the ground. And that's as it should be.
But it's becoming increasingly important to also be concerned about the noise impact your operations are having on our Montgomery Field Airport neighbors. Many pilots are often unaware of the effect they're having on people on the ground, but you do have an effect, and how you fly can make a big difference.
This video will show how you, as a pilot, can greatly reduce the noise impact of your operations at Montgomery Field, and how you can do it without compromising safety.
Let's cover the noise abatement procedure for a takeoff at Montgomery Airport. First of all, start your takeoff at the runway end. And remember, intersection takeoffs and stop-and-go operations are not allowed at Montgomery Airport anyway. But by making sure that you start your takeoff at the end of the runway, that will give you the most altitude by the time you reach the noise-sensitive areas. The second thing you want to do, if you're a retractable aircraft, you want to retract your gear when you have a positive rate of climb. Don't wait until you're past the end of the runway. All you need to do is wait until there's not enough runway left for you to land on. So get that gear up once you have a positive rate of climb. Continue your climb at the best rate of climb speed. If you're comfortable with it, the best angle of climb speed would give even a quieter departure in many airplanes. But at a minimum, climb at the best rate of climb speed, climb at VY. Now, as soon as it's safe to do so, reduce to cruise climb power. Particularly what you want to do is get the engine RPM back. Now, why is it so important to get the engine RPM back? Because prop tip speed is very important for noise. Depending on the diameter of the propeller and the RPM of the engine, the prop tips can be doing 700 plus miles per hour or Mach 0.94. That is noisy. So by getting the engine RPM back, reducing the RPM, you reduce the noise enormously. In a Bonanza, for instance, if you look in the flight manual, the Bonanza shows an alternate RPM for climb of 2550 RPM instead of 2700 RPM. Now that reduction in RPM costs 100 feet per minute on climb, that's all. But it makes a big difference on noise. Noise tests done right here at Montgomery have shown that a 200 RPM reduction can produce a 6 to 8 decibel reduction, and that is an enormous difference in perceived noise. Now, don't worry about the reduction in engine RPM having you operate over square. Over square meaning with a higher manifold pressure than RPM. When you look at the manufacturer's manuals for an aircraft or an engine, you'll find power settings. For instance, in a Lycoming manual, power settings like 28 inches of manifold pressure with only 2,500 RPM. Not a problem to have a higher manifold pressure than you do have RPM. But you always want to look at your own aircraft's flight manual, study your own flight manual for your aircraft to make sure of what's going to be an acceptable power setting as far as the climb is concerned. Okay, you've reduced the power, if you can, in order to reduce the prop speed and noise. you want to maintain that best rate of climb speed. Continue climbing at that speed. And you want to comply with the recommended noise abatement departure procedures out of Montgomery Airport. Now, what is the single most important thing that you can do to reduce noise on takeoff? If your aircraft has a constant speed prop, the single most important thing you can do is reduce the RPM. And for everybody else, the single most important thing you can do is gain altitude. The more altitude you have, the less noise impact you're going to have.
Now let's talk about some good noise abatement techniques you can use when you're arriving at Montgomery Field. The most important thing you can do is fly as high as possible, as long as possible. After all, once again, it's how far you are away from the sensitive neighborhood that's going to make a big difference. The recommended pattern altitudes, if you're flying on the north side of the airport for singles, is 1,200 feet MSL. For twins, 1,600 feet MSL. On the south side of the airport for singles, it's 1,400 feet MSL, and for twins, it's 2,000 feet MSL. Now, what you should do is maintain that pattern altitude on downwind until you're turning base, and don't let the aircraft drift down. Many people let the aircraft just drift down. You don't want to do that. Particularly on an extended downwind, you'll find people who start drifting down when they pass the intended landing point. Well, don't do that. Don't begin your descent on an extended downwind until you actually begin to get high and need to get down for landing. Now, on final, you can see the VASI. You might be interested to know that the regulations require that you fly above or on the glide path of the VASI until it's necessary to descend safely for landing. So you got to stay on or above the VASI or the glide slope. Now, make your approach at minimum power and do it at clean configuration, and probably the most important thing you can do is make it with low RPM. And you should use RPM that's even lower than for cruise. Keep that noise down, keep that prop tip speed down. And by the way, it's better for the engine anyway, because if you're operating too under square, that means too high in RPM, too low in manifold pressure, you might have piston slap, which could be damaging to the engine. So keep your RPM down. You'll not only be doing the neighbors a favor, but you'll be doing your engine a favor too. And don't put that propeller forward right away. And don't put it forward until throttle reductions have reduced the engine RPM. When you're to the point, you're slow enough and you have the throttle back enough that the engine RPM has already started coming back, then you can put the prop forward and you won't have a big jump in RPM and lots of noise. Now, watch your gear and flap configuration. Use flaps only when you need to get down and slow down. That's the purpose of flaps. Flying into the airport with flaps down and lots of power is like having on a car the gas and brakes on at the same time. It's just plain old poor technique. So use the flaps when you need to get down or slow down, but don't fly with both lots of power and the flaps on at the same time. Now, if you're inbound from the east, don't put the gear down right away and drag it in. Delay your gear extension until you cross Interstate 15 because it requires more power and therefore makes more noise to fly with the gear down. Now, we promised we would tell you the single most important thing you can do to reduce noise on landing. Well, it's the same as on takeoff. If you're flying an airplane with a constant speed propeller, keep that RPM down. For everybody else, stay high. Keep away from the noise-sensitive neighborhoods. Now, use these techniques, and you too can make friends for Montgomery Field.
Well, that wraps up Making Friends for Montgomery Field. We hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as we've enjoyed putting it together for you. And now, John will reveal right here, right now, on this very tape, the most important consideration of all regarding noise abatement. Okay, John, let's have it.
Well, that's easy, Martha. There's nothing to it. Don't crash. Crashing is the noisiest thing you could do.
And John, I guess you need to really worry about that.
Oh, no, Martha. You see, I'm a superior pilot.
Oh, yeah, sure.
No, seriously. You see, a superior pilot is one who uses his superior judgment to avoid situations that just might require the use of his superior skills.
That's very true. And we know that you are superior pilots, and we'll use your superior judgment to fly quietly and safely at Montgomery Field.
Have fun in your flying, and by all means, please,
Stay out of the trees.